when we talk about sustainable development goals on matters as mundane as water, we are no longer in control. So when we will come as government officials and spew out statistics in Africa, we are lying to ourselves. We are lying because even the water we don't control. And what we are therefore telling each other, I was talking about the Chad Basin. What is going to happen in that region? Because if you don't have water, there is conflict. If you go to West Africa now, the grazing rights, the battle between the grazing communities and the agricultural communities is because of water conflict. And these conflicts stand in the way of development. We talk about sustainable development goals. In the absence of peace, there can be no development. In the year 2020, Africa pronounced itself the year of the silencing of the guns. And if you look at some of the conflicts that are emerging in many of the river basins across the continent of Africa, they are out of water. Whether we are talking about Zambezi or Rufiji, we are talking about Ruvuma or the Tana or the Mano, and you know all of them. And some of the conflicts are not huge conflicts. They are conflicts in communities, the effect of which is to undermine all the other initiatives that we are engaged in, whether it is in the provision of health or in the area of agriculture or in the area of provision of energy. But yet, and I repeat this, if we collaborate a lot more, transboundary waters are going to be one of the game changers in Africa. At every forum, when we talk about water, there is always this cliche. The Inga Dam can power the whole of Africa. We know, we have been saying that for many years, that if we harness the River Congo Basin and the Inga Dam, then all Africa or most Africa could be powered. And why is powering Africa important? It is important because without energy, you cannot industrialize. And without industrialization, you become a consumer. I want you all, ladies and gentlemen, to look at the tables that you are occupying. 3/4 of the things you have are produced from China. 3/4, including these flags that you see here, they are made in China. All of them. And I'm telling you this on a very mundane issue that you must know how vulnerable we are because we don't have the ability to produce. So when we talk about water, why can't Africa talk about production of electricity? The Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, Kambarage Nyerere Dam, which is going to be commissioned now, is going to benefit most of East Africa. The GRD is going to do that. The Inga can do that. The Kariba can do that. The Kainji can do that. But are we collaborating in a manner that ensures that this is done? We are not. Iran generates more power than all sub-Saharan countries combined. Iran. South Korea produces more electricity than all sub-Saharan countries combined. What can we do in order to ensure that we use these waters in a manner that is going to help us realize our goals? To have water, basically, to improve our health because you need a healthy population, to improve our agriculture. And I want to give you the story of agriculture. In the next 5 years, Africa is going to be a net importer of food. Nigeria is going to import more chicken from Brazil. Ghana is going to import more rice from Pakistan. Kenya is going to import more maize from Brazil. We are going to import more eggs from Romania. That is our state. We are going to import more wheat from Ukraine. Because as I speak to you, there are conflict. There is no meaningful farming happening in Sudan because of conflict. There is no meaningful farming happening in the Tigray region and Amhara region of Ethiopia. There is no meaningful farming happening in Democratic Republic of Congo, the eastern side of it. There is no meaningful farming happening in Central African Republic. There is no farming in the entire Sahelian region. That is the reality of Africa. And that being the reality, we are still, as a people, still dependent on rain-fed agriculture. Yet we could use these transboundary waters responsibly in order to improve the quality of our agriculture. But what do? We pray and fast that it may rain. We should stop praying and fasting. We should be using transboundary waters for purposes of irrigation. That is what has happened in different and other parts of the world. And if we did this, then Africa could benefit from this. But I do not intend to speak for long, because my paper speaks in detail. I simply want to remind us that there is every reason for Africans to sit back. The other problem we have in Africa is the assumption that our problems will be solved by others. There is no shortage of conferences that we attend in Africa. Finance, including this one, financed by GIZ, financed by UK Aid. We are in the business of having our things being underwritten by others. We must stop it. If we don't stop it, we are going nowhere. And that includes supporting our institutions. If you look very carefully, even the Nile Basin is funded from outside. If you look carefully, I haven't looked carefully, but I won't be surprised. If you are funded by others, you are limited in what you can achieve. We recently have the Nairobi Climate Declaration, and all of us acknowledge that the climate is beginning to affect us. We are going to have El Nino in the region, and we are looking to Europe to fund us. Why should they fund us? Why? We are looking to America to fund us. Why should they fund us? Why can't we fund ourselves? So one of the things that I'm also saying is that if we want to work on transboundary use of water, it would not be difficult, for example, to levy a tax within the basin, with the Nile Basin, and is understood throughout. And we could say that it is a water tax, which is 0.5%. Then we can improve our transboundaries. One of the things now is pollution. How do we deal with solid waste? Here in Uganda, as an example, when was the last time you did a sewer line? Most of the construction on Entebbe are on septic tanks. When they come to take your solid waste, do you ever ask where they are taking them? You don't. And if you look very keenly, it is being deposited in Lake Victoria. But we don't care. Even us who are experts here, living on septic tanks, when they take it, you don't care. So these are the things that we must talk about. In other words, conferences such as this must make meaning to Africans in the villages. Otherwise, we are preaching to the converted. Conferences such as this must be translated to the ground so that we are able to understand. It is Mwalimu Kambarage Nyerere who used to say that cooperation and conflict are two sides of the same coin. We can collaborate, and the more people are, the better it is to collaborate, and also the greater the potential for conflict. So the question is, those of you who are here, who are asking me to talk about deepening transboundary cooperation, and I'm talking about it, are you prepared? When you go back home, what are you going, when you come from the Nile River Basin and you are talking about SDGs and Africa Agenda 2063 and Water Africa Vision 2025 and your national visions, if it is Uganda, it's 2040, if it's Kenya, it's 2030, and if it is Malawi, it's 2063, and if it is Tanzania, I suspect it is 2040. What are you going to tell them about water? What are you going to tell them about health? What are you going to tell them about agriculture? What are you going to tell them about sanitation? What are you going to tell them about energy? What are you going to tell them about conflict? What are you going to tell them about dispute resolution when you come out of here? You who are coming from the Nile Basin. Those of you who come from the Chad Basin, where there is no fish now and communities are in conflict, what are you going to do about it? The Chinese are now propagating fish in fish ponds. Are we doing that? What are you going to tell them about wetlands? Are you going to divide them into plots so that you may build high-rise buildings? Those of you from the Zambezi and the Orange, what are you going to tell about them? What are you going to tell your government? Do your governments listen to you? Or they don't? Honorable Minister, you are now the chair. When your time ends, what are you going to give us at the 8th Nile Basin? What are you going to tell us? Beyond statistics, are we going to have poor Ugandans who are going to give testimonies so that the testimony of Guyana will not be read by her? I want Guyana here. Are you going to bring ordinary people from different parts of Africa to give their testimony from Gulu, from Bangui? When you don't do that, I'll not attend the next meeting.